The mahogany-paneled study of the Harrison estate felt suffocating that afternoon. Outside, rain pelted against century-old windows, but inside, the atmosphere was even more oppressive. Designer suits, Italian leather shoes, and jewelry worth more than most people's annual salary filled the room. The family had gathered for the reading of Thomas Harrison's will. Patriarch, business mogul, and recently departed billionaire. In the corner, almost invisible against the dark wood, sat a woman in a modest blue dress and worn cardigan. No jewelry adorned her fingers or neck. Her hands, showing signs of years of manual labor, rested in her lap. When she had entered, eyebrows raised. Whispers followed. "What is she doing here? Probably cleaned his house or something." Thomas always had a soft spot for the help. Margaret Fletcher kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her gray-streaked hair partially hiding her face. At 53, she looked older than her years, weathered by a life that had never been gentle. She had arrived last, taken the furthest seat, and spoken to no one. The attorney, Mr. Calloway, entered with the gravity of someone about to detonate an explosive. His assistant carried a stack of documents and a sealed envelope. The family straightened. Cousins, nieces, nephews, Thomas's son Bradford and daughter Elaine, both in their 40s, sat front and center. "Ladies and gentlemen," Calloway began, his voice cutting through the tense silence, "we're here to execute the last will and testament of Thomas William Harrison." Bradford leaned forward, already counting the offshore accounts in his mind. Elaine's hand tightened around her designer purse. "Can we move this along? I have a charity gala at 6. Calloway nodded without emotion. "Of course. But before we begin with the standard provisions, Mr. Harrison left explicit instructions about the order of proceedings." He retrieved an envelope sealed with wax. "First, he asked that I play this recording for everyone present." Calloway pressed a button on a small device. The room filled with Thomas Harrison's voice, strong despite his illness, addressing them from beyond the grave. "To my family gathered here today, I have one final lesson to teach you about value, about worth, about what truly matters in this world." The recording paused for a moment, and Thomas's voice continued, now more pointed. "I want to acknowledge someone special who is hopefully in this room. Margaret Fletcher." All eyes turned to the woman in the corner. Margaret's head lifted slightly, her weathered face showing surprise. Bradford scoffed loudly. "The cleaning lady? Really, Dad?" Elaine rolled her eyes. "Always with the dramatics." Thomas's voice continued undeterred. "Margaret worked as my housekeeper for the past 15 years. But unlike most of you, she never asked me for a single thing." Margaret shifted uncomfortably as the stares intensified. A distant cousin snickered. "While you all were busy spending my money, Margaret was working 16-hour days cleaning homes to support her daughter through medical school. While you were demanding larger allowances, she was taking night buses home to save on taxi fare. While you were competing for my attention with empty flattery, she quietly left homemade soup outside my door during my chemotherapy, never once mentioning it was her." The room fell silent. Margaret's eyes remained fixed on her hands. "When I first met Margaret," Thomas's voice softened, "I had just fired my previous housekeeper for stealing. I was angry, bitter, suspicious of everyone. Margaret came recommended by the agency. The day she interviewed, it was pouring rain. She was soaking wet because she'd given her umbrella to an elderly man at the bus stop. Several family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. I asked why she'd do something so foolish. She said, 'He seemed like he needed it more than me, sir.' That was the moment I knew she was different." Bradford stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Are we really sitting here listening to stories about the help? How much is he leaving her? A month's extra salary? Can we get to the actual inheritance?" "Mr. Calloway raised a hand. "Mr. Harrison was very specific about the order of proceedings. 3 Christmases ago," Thomas continued, "while everyone here was opening expensive gifts I'd purchased, Margaret was working in my kitchen. Bradford, you might remember complaining that the turkey was dry. What you didn't know was that Margaret had received a call that morning that her daughter had been hospitalized with pneumonia. Yet she still came to work because she didn't want to disappoint me." Elaine's face flushed. She had been particularly demanding that Christmas. "When I discovered this, I insisted she go to the hospital immediately. Do you know what she said? She asked if she could pack up leftover food to take to other families in the hospital ward, who couldn't afford Christmas dinner." Margaret's eyes had filled with tears now. A tissue appeared in her hand. "That day changed me." Thomas's voice cracked slightly. "It made me look at my own family and what I had created with my wealth, and I didn't like what I saw. Thomas's voice grew stronger, more resolved. Bradford, when you were 8, I missed your school play to close a business deal. When you were 12, I sent my assistant to your baseball championship. When you graduated high school, I was in Tokyo. I replaced presents with presents, love with luxury. I created a son who measures his worth by his bank balance. Bradford's face hardened, his knuckles white against the armrest. Elaine, I missed your dance recitals. I missed your heartbreaks. I was absent during your struggles with anxiety in college. Instead of being there, I wrote checks. And now you fill the emptiness with shopping bags and social media validation. Elaine's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. Her husband reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The rest of you, Thomas continued, addressing the extended family. Some I barely know. Others I know too well. Always there when the checkbook appears. Nowhere to be found when I needed actual family. Murmurs of protest rippled through the room. Last year, when my cancer returned and the prognosis was terminal, I made a decision. I would use whatever time I had left to correct my greatest failure, the values I failed to instill in my family. Margaret dabbed at her eyes quietly. The recording paused, filled with the sound of Thomas taking a labored breath. I started watching, really watching. Who visited without being prompted by my assistant? Who asked about my comfort rather than my portfolio? Who treated my household staff with dignity? The silence in the room was deafening now. Bradford, when you visited, you spent most of the time on your phone. You asked about my investment strategies, but never about my pain. Elaine, you redecorated my hospice room without asking, complaining about the depressing atmosphere while ignoring that I was dying in it. Several family members shifted uncomfortably. A few looked genuinely ashamed. Meanwhile, Margaret would quietly adjust my pillows when she thought I was sleeping. She brought fresh flowers from her own small garden. When she finished her work, sometimes she would sit and read to me. Not business reports, but poetry, novels, things to nourish the soul. Thomas's voice broke slightly. One night, in terrible pain, I asked her why she was so kind to an old man who was just her employer. She said something I'll never forget. Mr. Harrison, no amount of money determines a person's worth. We're all just humans trying to get through this life with some dignity. A tear slid down Margaret's cheek. Several other family members looked away, some with shame, others with mounting anger. That night, I called Mr. Calloway and rewrote my will. Bradford stood suddenly. This is insane. Dad was clearly not in his right mind. We'll contest this immediately. Mr. Calloway raised his hand again. There's more, Mr. Harrison. The recording continued. I've had endless resources but wasted the true currency of life. Time, attention, and love. My fortune didn't make me happy. It didn't buy me more time. And clearly it didn't build character in those I cared for most. Thomas's voice became firmer. So, I made a choice that I know will be unpopular. A choice that might finally teach the lesson money never could. The recording ended. Mr. Calloway cleared his throat and opened the formal will document. The last will and testament of Thomas William Harrison, he began. To my son Bradford Harrison, I leave the sum of $100,000. Bradford's face contorted in shock. 100,000? Out of billions? This is a joke. Mr. Calloway continued unperturbed. To my daughter Elaine Harrison Wells, I leave the sum of $100,000. Elaine gasped, her hand flying to her throat. That's impossible. To each of my nieces, nephews, and extended family members present, I leave the sum of $10,000 each. The room erupted. Shouts of outrageous and we'll contest this filled the air. Mr. Calloway raised his voice. There are conditions attached to these bequests. Each recipient must complete 1 year of community service with the Harrison Foundation for Economic Justice, working directly with underprivileged communities. The money will be held in trust until this service is completed. Bradford laughed bitterly. So we have to earn our own inheritance? This is ridiculous. As for the remainder of the estate, Mr. Calloway continued when the noise subsided, including all properties, business holdings, investments, art collections, and liquid assets, valued at approximately $4.7 billion. The room fell deadly silent. These assets will be divided as follows. 50% will establish the Harrison Foundation for Economic Justice, dedicated to providing educational opportunities and small business grants in underprivileged communities. More murmurs, but subdued now, as the family began to realize the gravity of the situation. The remaining 50%, approximately $235 billion, along with the main estate house and its contents, I leave to Margaret Fletcher. The silence shattered. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Bradford lunged forward, his face crimson. "This is fraud! She manipulated him! We'll sue! She can't possibly!" "Mr. Harrison anticipated your reaction," Mr. Calloway interjected. "The will has been reviewed by 3 independent legal teams. Mr. Harrison underwent extensive psychological evaluation before finalizing these decisions. Everything is in order." Margaret sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. "This can't be right," she whispered. "I never wanted his money." Mr. Calloway walked over and handed her an envelope. "Mr. Harrison also left this letter for you, to be read privately." Bradford stormed toward Margaret, looming over her. "You planned this. You wormed your way into a dying old man's good graces and manipulated him." Margaret stood slowly, her voice soft but steady. "I loved my job. I respected your father. That's all." Elaine joined her brother. 15 years as his housekeeper and suddenly you get billions? How stupid do you think we are? Mr. Calloway intervened. "There's one more recording Mr. Harrison asked to be played if the situation became confrontational." He pressed play again. Thomas's voice filled the room once more. "If you're hearing this, then my family is likely behaving exactly as I predicted. Let me be clear. Margaret had no knowledge of my intentions. In fact, knowing her character, she's probably as shocked as you are." Margaret nodded silently, still clutching the unopened letter. "But I've watched for years as she demonstrated the values I failed to instill in my own children. Humility, compassion, dignity in hardship, generosity, even when you have little to give." Thomas's voice softened. "Margaret's daughter Emily is now a pediatric oncologist, treating children with the same cancer that's taking my life. Margaret worked 3 jobs to put her through medical school. Emily has saved dozens of children already." Several family members glanced at Margaret with new eyes. "While my own children were hosting yacht parties, Margaret was volunteering at homeless shelters on her days off. While my relatives were asking for loans they never intended to repay, Margaret was sharing her modest lunch with our gardener, who couldn't afford his own." Thomas's voice became stronger. "I'm not punishing you. I'm giving you an opportunity to discover what real wealth is. It's not in bank accounts. It's in how you treat people who can offer you nothing in return." The months following the will reading transformed the Harrison family in ways no one could have predicted. Bradford, initially furious, contested the will, but quickly discovered his father's legal team had made it airtight. Faced with the choice of community service or nothing, he reluctantly reported to the Harrison Foundation's newest project, renovating housing in the city's poorest district. On his 3rd day, Bradford, dressed in clothes still too expensive for the work, was struggling to remove old drywall when he cut his hand. A small boy, maybe 7 years old, approached him silently and offered a bandage from his pocket. "Thanks, kid," Bradford said dismissively. "My mom says we should always help people, even when they're grumpy," the boy replied. Bradford looked at him, thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days, but with clear eyes and a direct gaze. "Your mom sounds smart." "She is. We live there." He pointed to an apartment Bradford had just helped gut. "She works 3 jobs. We're staying with my aunt until this place is fixed." Something in Bradford shifted that day. He began arriving early, staying late. He learned residents' names, heard their stories. People who worked hard yet remained poor. Children with dreams as big as his had been, but without the resources to pursue them. Meanwhile, Elaine had chosen to work at a women's shelter affiliated with the foundation. Initially, she complained constantly about the conditions, the clientele, the meaninglessness of it all. Then she met Sophia, a woman her age who had fled domestic violence with her 2 daughters. Sophia had been a marketing executive before her husband's abuse escalated. Now she was rebuilding from nothing. "How do you stay so positive?" Elaine asked her one day, genuinely curious. Sophia smiled. "When you lose everything, you discover what everything really is. It's not the house or the car or the job title. It's waking up safe. It's your children's laughter. It's having one person believe in you when you've stopped believing in yourself." The conversation haunted Elaine. She began bringing her marketing expertise to the shelter, creating professional development workshops for the women. She helped Sophia prepare for job interviews, loaned her appropriate clothing. When Sophia received a job offer, they both cried. As for Margaret, she had initially tried to refuse the inheritance. "This isn't right," she told Mr. Calloway. "This money should go to his children." "Read his letter," Calloway suggested gently. In it, Thomas had written, "Margaret, Your initial instinct will be to refuse this gift. Please don't. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not. I'm asking you to do more of what you already do naturally. Help people who need it, with resources I was blessed with but squandered. You know the value of $1. You know the dignity of work. You know how to see people as people, not as assets or inconveniences. The world needs more of that wisdom, not less. Reluctantly, Margaret accepted. She kept her modest home but established a foundation focusing on medical care for uninsured children. She funded scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. She created job training programs in struggling communities. 6 months after the will reading, Margaret visited one of the foundation's housing renovation projects. She was surprised to find Bradford there, sweaty and covered in paint, teaching teenagers how to properly finish drywall. "Mr. Harrison," she said formally, still uncomfortable around the family. Bradford looked up, then straightened. He'd lost weight, gained muscle, and somehow looked younger despite the construction dust in his hair. "Margaret," he nodded. Then, surprising them both, he added, "Thank you for coming. These kids are doing amazing work. This one here," he put his hand on a teenage boy's shoulder, "has a real talent for design. I was hoping the foundation might consider a scholarship for him." Margaret blinked, momentarily speechless. "Of course," she managed finally. "We can certainly arrange that." Later that week, Elaine called Margaret for the first time. "I have this client at the shelter," she began awkwardly. "She's incredibly talented but needs childcare to accept a job offer that could change her life. I was wondering if—" "Send me the details," Margaret said simply. "We'll make it happen." 1 year after Thomas Harrison's death, the family gathered again. Not in the formal study, but in the community center the Harrison Foundation had built. The occasion was the ribbon cutting for a new medical clinic providing free care to uninsured children. Bradford, now serving as a volunteer construction manager for the foundation, stood beside his sister Elaine, who had completely restructured the foundation's marketing and outreach programs. Several cousins and extended family, most of whom had completed their required service and discovered unexpected fulfillment, were also present. Margaret, still uncomfortable with attention, tried to stay in the background, but Emily, her daughter the doctor who would be running the clinic, pulled her forward. "Mom," Emily said, her voice carrying to the gathered crowd, "you taught me that we measure wealth not by what we have, but by what we give. You worked your hands raw so I could heal with mine. There's no inheritance more valuable than that lesson." Bradford stepped forward, surprising everyone by taking the microphone. "A year ago, I hated my father for what I thought he'd taken from me," he began. "I was raised to believe that net worth determined human worth. I measured success in acquisitions rather than impact." He looked out at the community members gathered, people whose homes he'd helped rebuild, whose stories he now knew. "My father's last lesson was his greatest gift. Real wealth isn't measured in billions. It's measured in lives touched, in kindness offered when there's nothing to gain, in seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of their circumstances." Elaine joined her brother. "Our father created a fortune but missed the richness of authentic connection. Margaret showed us, through her example, that the true currency of a meaningful life is compassion." Margaret, uncomfortable with praise, finally spoke. "Thomas once told me that he regretted spending his life chasing wealth while missing love. In the end, he found a way to transform one into the other. That transformation continues through all of you." She gestured to the clinic behind them. "This place will heal children regardless of their parents' bank accounts. It will see their worth as human beings, not as financial calculations." Emily added, "Every child who walks through these doors will be treated with dignity. Every parent will be respected. That is the true Harrison legacy." As the ceremony concluded and the doors officially opened, Bradford approached Margaret privately. "I never apologized," he said quietly, "for how I treated you, for who I was." Margaret shook her head. "Your actions speak louder than any apology." "My father was right about you," Bradford continued, "and right about what I needed to learn." Margaret smiled. "The true wealth is how you treat those who can offer you nothing in return." Later, as Margaret watched Bradford patiently explaining a building plan to a teenager interested in architecture, and Elaine warmly welcoming a formerly homeless family to the center, she knew that Thomas's true inheritance had nothing to do with money after all. It was about recognizing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their status or circumstances. It was about understanding that our treatment of others, especially those who can offer us nothing in return, reveals our true character. And you? Have you ever judged someone by their appearance or status, only to discover hidden depths? Share your story in the comments below.